His name is Saul Alinsky, and there are still many to whom the name is meaningless. But to millions now, he is looked on as a savior. And these are the so-called have-nots, the culturally deprived, the abject poor. They love him, and they ask him in to organize their weakness into a strength and power that has become a frightening threat to the establishment.
There is, I suppose, given a choice, I think I would pick hell. The reason I'd pick hell is because that's where all the have-nots are. We only go in upon the invitation and the request of the people, so that no one can ever say to us that we're outsiders. No one can ever say to us, who asked you to come in here? No one can ever say to us, what's your racket? We can say to people in the community, we're here because you asked for us to come in here. In Rochester, New York, out of a population of 35,000, we received individually signed petitions, more than 13,000 people out of 35,000. And you figure the number of children that make up a total population of 35,000, you can almost say that every Negro in Rochester signed the petitions. Every civil rights group requested our coming in. Every church within the Negro community. Why, in Buffalo, New York, where the budget is about $175,000, a budget which has been raised now. I'm going to Buffalo this week. The Negro community, the low-income Negro community, out of their own pockets, put up more than $30,000 of that budget.
You can just start whenever you want. Just make sure I know what
Okay. So let me know when you're ready.
Anytime.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good evening. My name is Doug Ruffin of Jet Set Entertainment. It was believed to be the most powerful and influential community organization in the city of Buffalo, New York. It was an organization that was established in the height of both the civil rights and Black Power movements, under the influence of Saul Alinsky, a former organizer in the labor movement, who dedicated his life to teaching communities how to effectively organize, to fight the system and win. In this program, we will examine the history of this community organization through its rise and fall. There is no guarantee that the whole story will be told. We can only attempt to do so. You will receive firsthand accounts from the leaders, staff members, volunteers, as well as others whose lives were affected in one way or the other by the B.U.I.L.D organization.
All right, one take, Ruffin.
Reflecting on the 25th anniversary of the B.U.I.L.D documentary series, it's really an amazing thing. Many times throughout this year, I've had to actually remind myself that it's actually been that long. I'm certainly glad and proud to see that it's made the impact on the city of Buffalo and beyond that it has made. When I look at who and what it's influenced activists, people that want to be involved in their community. It's influenced filmmakers, up and come people that wanted to get into the media industry. It's influenced new historians that have taken an interest in aspects of Buffalo's history as well as Buffalo's African American history. So I have to say it's quite an accomplishment. It's impacted on college students. I mean, I can't tell you how much correspondence I get even to this day, even as recently as like early this year, where I have students that are working on doing their doctoral studies and their dissertations and theses. I even have high school students doing term papers or whatever on, various aspects of Buffalo history because they saw something on the Buffalo History Channel. It's, I'm glad to see that it definitely served the purpose. I did not think that I would be sitting here to this day and talking about it and reflecting upon it like I am now and like I have been over the years. But it's definitely something that makes me proud, because when I think back to the process of just bringing that whole thing, that whole effort, that whole project to fruition back in the mid to late 90s, it was one of the most massive undertakings of my life, and I didn't think that it would lead to something that would soon become my life's work, documenting and preserving the history of African American history of the city of Buffalo, New York, and being able to put my name in the category of people, of many historians and educators that came before me, such as Dr. Fordham, such as Dr. Eva Doyle, Mary Crosby Chappelle, Kevin Cottrell, many people, and a host of many others. And it's just, it's really an amazing thing and quite an accomplishment to just be able to sit here and look back on it with a sense of pride. It was back in November of 1994. Now, at this time, I had recently got out of college and came back to the city of Buffalo to start to begin my career in the local media. Worked for a few TV stations, and in the midst of starting to work for the TV stations, I knew I needed to do everything I could to get my skills up. And so I started to work at do some work on the side at the Buffalo and participate with the Buffalo Public Access Channel. And I had produced a show titled Power to the People, a special look at the Black Panther Party. And that aired in November of that year. And I can remember going to the place that my father worked, and I came into his office. Him and my grandfather were talking. He saw me. He said, "Hey, man, that documentary you put on was fantastic." And he was telling my grandfather about it, and he was telling another friend of his about it, John Smith. And then it was John that brought up, "Man, you do something on the Black Panthers. You ought to do something on the B.U.I.L.D organization." And then him and my father looked at each other, and they just started laughing. And at the time, I was like, okay. I didn't think much of it afterwards. One day I was at our old house, and I was up in the attic, and I was in the attic, and I was going through a whole bunch of my old stuff that I hadn't seen since I was a kid. And in the midst of that, I stumbled across a booklet, these two booklets, both of which said "B.U.I.L.D" on it. And there was another booklet that had Juneteenth on it. It was a book on the very first Juneteenth festival of 1976, which I fondly remembered going to as a little kid. And when I looked at it, I remember I paused for a minute and thought to myself, wait a minute. Oh, this is that B.U.I.L.D stuff that John was telling me about. And then I looked at the other book with Juneteenth on it, and I said to myself, wait a minute. Hold on a second. B.U.I.L.D and Juneteenth, that was the same thing? Okay. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind doing something. And at the time, I'm looking at Juneteenth. So I'm like, okay, I wouldn't mind doing something on the Juneteenth, but I didn't really know who to talk to or anything, or anybody about it. So I remember mentioning it to my dad, and he told me some story. He told me some stories about Juneteenth and B.U.I.L.D. And then I started to get reminded of a few things, because he told me that B.U.I.L.D Academy was part of it, and I went to B.U.I.L.D Academy as a student, obviously. Oh, okay. So I got a little bit more intrigued towards it, and that went on until about October of 1995. October 16th, 1995 to be exact, because of course we all know that the Million Man March took place. And I can remember when Minister Farrakhan made the charge at the end of the whole thing, where he made the charge to all black men to get out and do more in their communities. And I guess for whatever reason, I decided I was going to look more into this B.U.I.L.D project. This B.U.I.L.D, I mean, I wouldn't even call it a project then. I looked more into this B.U.I.L.D thing. So I went up to the Buffalo Public Library, downtown library, and I went to the card catalog in the reference section. And all of a sudden, I came across a whole stack of cards with newspaper articles from the Buffalo Evening News and the Courier Express. And it was a whole long litany of cards. So I would spend the next few weeks of the month of October going through the microfilms and printing up all of those articles, and it gave me a lot to read for a good while. And it really served as some good reading, because as I was reading through a lot of the articles, one of the things that it did was the one thing that stood out to me was the stories of the B.U.I.L.D Academy story, of where I went to school. And it tied some things together, particularly in the area of the school desegregation thing that they had going on. Of course, B.U.I.L.D Academy started off as a school for black children. Then they started integrating white kids into the school, and most of them, and at the time that I went to B.U.I.L.D Academy, most of the kids our classes were more integrated. So we were, and all those white kids were our friends. So we were all just friends at that time. So, but my point is that it tied a lot of things together as to, oh, that's why, because they would bus in kids from different areas of the city. So, okay. So you don't think some of these things you don't think about as a child, but when you get older, things start to come more full circle when you look back on it. By the end of that month, early November, I was working part-time at Channel 4, and I asked the operations manager if they had any. I just did it on a whim. I mean, who knows? I just figure I'll just try it. It doesn't hurt to try and doesn't hurt to ask. I asked them if you had any film footage of the B.U.I.L.D organization from the 1960s and 1970s. He told me that they no longer had it, that they gave it to the Buffalo and Erie County Historical Society. I called the Historical Society, asked the same question. They said they no longer have it. They said it's all stored up at Canisius College. I call up Canisius College, speak to a gentleman by the name of Terry Fisher. He says, "Oh yeah, we have them all here. Feel free to come here." He said, "You're welcome to come down and look through the boxes." I'm like, "Oh, okay." Not knowing what I was going to be greeted with, I go down to Canisius College. They're on the top floor of the media center. The Canisius College Media Center is on the top floor of this one building. I climb about maybe 5 to 6 flights of stairs. That was one hell of a workout. I get up there, practically out of breath. And he said, "You had fun climbing those stairs?" No. But he takes me to, I introduce myself, he takes me to the room. Before he opens up this door, I'll never forget this. He said, "Now, Doug, I don't know how you're going to do this, but take a look." He opens up the door, and it's a room with a sea full of boxes. Boxes, boxes, and more boxes. He walks away, he laughs and says, "Well, have fun. Enjoy your search." And I look into the room, I was like, Lord, what have I got myself into? This is the room where I spent 2 years in. It took me almost 2 years to do that documentary. And this here is the room that I spent almost 2 years in, looking through all those boxes of films. Remember when I told the stories about that? Well, right here on BCTV tonight exclusively, you're about to see it. Let's take a walk. Yeah, I want you to get the full effect of this. Open up this door wide open. Here come the lights. All right, come on in. Come on in. This is the place. This is the place, all up in here. Take the camera, show them the boxes over here. You see all these boxes? Take a good look. A real good, hard look.
And in particular, because it's that time period. I mean, the stuff that we had was specifically from 60s, mid-60s to mid-80s, that 20-year period. And when you were coming in, Doug Ruffin was coming in to make the documentary. I mean, boy, it was tailor-made because it covered that period of time. And there was a lot of great footage, you know, interviews, meetings, all kinds of things. And if you think about it, again, just happenstance, all of that would be decomposing in a landfill, except for a couple of phone calls. And I walk around the room, look at some of the boxes. I see, I did stumble across a couple boxes that said card catalog on it. I said, thank God. So as I look, so that's really how my search through the films, all those films began, in all those boxes. I went through the card catalogs. Don't forget, I also had a lot of the news articles, which all had the dates on them. So that too was a reference point. So as I find the dates, I look for the box with the adjoining dates and the topics on the cards. So I'm looking through cards and I'm finding all kinds of stuff, man. All kinds of stuff. Then I stumble across first meeting of B.U.I.L.D. January 31st, 1967. I find the box with that date. I pull the film. I went to ask if he has a projector. They wound up having a 16 millimeter projector, so they cart that over. Didn't have a screen, so I had to shine it on the wall. And I just sat there and ran the film through, and oh, okay, interesting. I looked through the card catalog some more. I went from 1967 up to about 1969. I find the film on Build Academy. Now that's the turn. Now that right there was, that I will say was a turn. That was one of the main turning points. I find this film on Build Academy. I run that through the projector. Then I see the first image I see is the image of the building of Clinton Street, and bam, because I went there when I was in kindergarten. So as soon as I see that, and the big Build Academy sign, I am immediately like sucked in. It's as if I stepped into a time machine and went right back to 1976 when I first got dropped off at Build Academy, and I'm just blown away by looking at this footage. And I remember asking Terry, is there a way that I can make a copy of this on tape? So he sends me down to a David Photo, where I would always drop those films off to get transferred. I get those transferred, get them on a VHS tape, and at that point, that's where that's where I kind of get very, very confident. And I say to myself, you know what? This could happen, and it could also be extraordinary if it could be completed. Because if I found this, for what little I found today, imagine what I could find going forward. So that right there is how the B.U.I.L.D documentary journey officially began. One has to really go back to how things were in the Buffalo media back in the 1990s. You can't, many times we'll talk about the media today here in 2022, and we talk about things as they presently stand today in 2022. We're in the middle of a social media era. Social media is as full circle as it can possibly be. Well, I embarked on this journey officially back in 1995. And the first thing I'm going to tell you is that there was no such animal as social media. We barely even had internet. The internet was just beginning to come out and be accessible to the general public. So, and people really you didn't even have websites back then. You had more so had web pages. So that in and of itself was a very slow process to come to fruition. But seeing the vision for this documentary and thinking about all that it could possibly be, the landscape in Buffalo was very barren. It was wide open for possibilities. Don't get me wrong, but you did not have any kind of an easy avenue towards it, or easy or streamlined avenue towards it. It was something that your resources were very limited, and things were still rather primitive. I mean, video itself was not even digital. It was still, we were still in an analog period. So things were kind of, whatever you were going to try to make happen, you definitely had to work a whole lot harder at it. You didn't have the idea or concept of local black filmmaking, for example, in Buffalo. That wasn't even a thought, so, and I didn't really consider myself a filmmaker, even though when I finally released B.U.I.L.D, people referred to me as that. Because I was always in television. So I kind of referred to myself as more of a TV producer, director. Not so much a filmmaker, but that's kind of the moniker that was given to me. So eventually I would wind up taking it on. It is what it is. But I knew then that this could really be, if done right, this could really be something special, because there wasn't a whole lot of history documentation going on at any kind of a high level. The only thing that you had going on at the time was when Kevin Cottrell was just beginning doing his efforts to bring attention to Michigan Avenue and everything that went on over there with the Michigan Street Baptist Church and the Colored Musicians Club. And I don't believe they had quite as of yet discovered the Nash House. I think they were just getting, him and George Arthur were just getting ready to it around that point, but I don't believe that they had quite done it yet. So even that part of it was something new. So there were definitely a lot of possibilities. Also, Buffalo has always had a love for its past, and I felt that particularly with discovering all of these newsreels, these 16 millimeter films from the TV stations that were just right here in this room and were just so readily available to me. And there's nobody else was really in there doing anything. I was literally the only one that was basically going through all that stuff at the time. And I hadn't really fully grasped the whole. I didn't realize how fortunate I was. I didn't completely believe my luck at this time. It didn't completely resonate with me what I had in front of me. But over time it would. And I knew that it was important that you do this, you got to do right by it. And to tell this thing, to be able to bring this story to fruition, and once done, I couldn't even imagine all the things that would grow out from that you basically see going on today with this renewed interest in Buffalo's history, with the people that are out here being involved in all these new activists being involved in the community that watch the documentary, the filmmakers that are out here telling their own Buffalo stories. This was really a maiden voyage, man, and it was kind of a scary thing, and it was a challenging thing, but I was definitely up for the challenge. It was like basically swimming out into the ocean with no thought of there was no thought of coming back. So you swim out to the ocean and not know if you're gonna continue to swim or sink. It was truly that kind of a process. So I find the films, and I'm going through all these films. I would be doing that for about the next couple of years or whatever, year and a half, give or take. And in the process of that, I knew I had to start talking to some of the people that appeared in a lot of these films. And many of these people at that time were still around. So I began to reach out to Bill Gator. I began to reach out to Miriam B.U.I.L.D. I began to reach out to the principal of my school, B.U.I.L.D. Academy, Mrs. Mayo. And as I'm talking to all of these, I spoke to a host of people. I spoke to more than several people and interviewed them. And I didn't really, it was something that I did, but didn't really give a whole great deal of thought to it. You know, as I'm starting to go into the production process, I needed some kind of a model. What type of other, I've always, all my life, you know, ever since I was a kid, I've always been into documentaries. So, one of the models that I used, I had two models that I used for this. The Eyes on the Prize series, which was produced by Henry Hampton and Blackside. And the other model was Malcolm X, Make It Plain. In fact, I was working for a PBS station at the time. And that had just, around that time, that had recently around that time come out. So those were my models. I looked at how they did their interviews, and I tried to model those interviews as much by that as possible. The interviews took place at people's homes. It took place in people's offices where they worked. That's pretty much how that went. I derived my interview questions. I had a master sheet. I took my interview questions from all the news articles that I came across. I took information from that. The film, the newsreels that I had like 2 videotapes worth of all these newsreels that I had collected from those boxes. I had 2 to 3 VHS tapes. So, and I always have them like, I would go to their homes. I would show them the tapes and let them look at it. And you should see the expression. You could have seen the expressions on their faces when they see this stuff and have all this stuff thrown back in their faces. When they were 20 years younger and ambitious and full of fire. They all enjoyed looking at the tapes. So everybody I spoke to, they were all on board, man. And they even would tell stories behind the films that I showed them, or stories behind the news articles that I told them about. And so I had a master log. Like I said, I had a master log of well over 100 and some questions. And I would take different questions and apply it to certain individuals. And I still have all of the tapes that were shot of all the interviews. I still have those tapes to this day. And it's amazing to really look at all that stuff today and see what a collection that I've had, because I sat there and conducted the interviews myself. And now, decades later, to see what I'm doing on the Buffalo History Channel with the people that I'm continuing to interview to this day, I've lost count of how many people. Somebody asked me one time, how many people have you interviewed? I could, even as I'm sitting here right now, I couldn't tell you. I have no idea how many people I've interviewed, but the whole process with those interviews was, like I said, I didn't give a lot of thought to it, but maybe because I wasn't one who was I wasn't really into news. I didn't get into the media to get into the news or be a journalist and be on the TV news. I got into the media to really to be a commercial producer. I was into commercial production. I wanted to be in commercial production and get into TV programming. I wanted to be the person that made the decisions on what went over the airwaves. You know, I wanted to be that person. So that's really what my focus was and somehow it got diverted into this whole documentary filmmaking thing. So I'm happy for it, because had I went in this direction, there likely would not be any of these documentaries, or even for that matter, a Buffalo History Channel. Because from the one, you get everything else. But yeah, to have a collection, to have had the opportunity, and many of these people that I interviewed today are no longer living, but the interviews still live on and exist to this day. And it has really been a amazing experience to have had the opportunity to sit down and talk with these people, to hear about the struggles out of, and the trials and tribulations of running a community organization, and living through Buffalo's civil rights and Black Power years. And I guess people refer to that now. I never realized at the time that what I was really doing was collecting a number of oral histories and digital storytelling, as they wound up calling it later. But that had already been, and even Dr. Fordham had told me that even his people had not even really sat down and interviewed, had videotaped and interviewed people from those civil rights and Black Power years like I had done. So that he told me that, he archived a lot of the papers from the organizations, and then he told me himself that I basically took the historical storytelling and documentation to a whole nother level. So that's something that really, it's really something to be proud of. And especially, it's especially unique when you don't even realize that you're even doing it. But I certainly am glad that I did it. When it comes to editing video, once again, I have to kind of harken back to what I said earlier about you can't look at things as they are today. This is back in the 90s. Nobody had editing on their laptop, on their nice little laptop computers or desktop computers in the comforts of their own home. It wasn't like that back then. You had to either get with a public access station or an arts organization. And if you got with an arts organization, you had to pay them by the hour. So that's how that came about. And but I actually I got somewhat lucky, because where I was living at the time, I was living down the street from an arts organization called Squeaky Wheel. And I was telling them about the project, and then they were highly interested in it. Spoke to a lady by the name of Cheryl Jackson. She was I am very thankful to her, because she was very interested in what I was doing. And they allowed me to what they said they wanted to do was she told me that I need to put together a premiere. When I finished the documentary, I need to put together like this one big premiere that everybody, and premiere screening that the public can come out to, and that they would get together with another group called Hall Walls and help put that together and sponsor that and co-sponsor that for me, which I was very appreciative to. And they allowed me to take up some residence in their editing facility, and I would be able to edit the whole documentary in their editing suite. And so the editing process basically came about by I had to write up and edit. I had to come up with some editing cue sheets and some edit scripts. And luckily, I still had some of the booklets and papers and forms and stuff that I had from when I was in college. So I made blank copies of those and put together some editing cue sheets. I had to go through all the interviews that I had. I had to do a log sheet and log all of the take out different sound bites from more than several interviews that I had. Then you have to visualize it with B-roll, with the film clips, the newsreel clips, and had to do like little camera work on some of the news headlines. Yeah, like I said, I had to kind of look back at how they did the Eyes on the Prize series, how they did Malcolm X Make It Plain, how they edit, how I never really talked to any of these people, so I had to kind of go by what I saw and do it how I thought they went and did it. So and then at the same time put my own flair and my own vision towards it. So that was somewhat of the fun part. I will admit, once I got all the editing sheets done and I logged all my interviews and put all my sound bites on the editing cue sheets and got everything set up to how I was going to edit it and go into the edit room. That part I will say was the fun part, because when you're putting it together, you can kind of see how your vision comes to life. I mean, you kind of have to do. I mean, I still had to learn about color correction. I still had to learn about working my audio, because the cameras that I worked with were basically camcorders. They ain't like the cameras that you got out here now with the DSLRs and the red cameras and the mirrorless cameras and all that jazz that you got going, that you've been having going on today. Like I said, things were different back then. And I didn't get a whole lot of financial support. I mean, I was able to get some support, a little bit of partial support from some people when I solicited for funding. Not a whole lot, but I got a little bit. It was enough to help me pay for the time that I had in the editing suites, in addition to putting my own personal money into it. So if I was able to, get my hands on better equipment, I certainly could have put out I have no doubt that I could have put out a much more superior product. I could have went and hired a doggone editor, which I would have loved to have done, but and hired camera people. But at the time, I was very limited on resources, and filmmaking was not a thing in Buffalo at this time. So it was all me. If I was going to make this happen, I had to be the one. I had to basically do everything myself. So, but it was a good experience. It was good. I'm glad that I had that experience. Yeah, I certainly would not trade. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Something like that can, in all seriousness, it makes stuff like that can makes a better person out of you. But there is a part of me that kind of wishes I could have had a little bit more, because I look at it today and there's things that I would have done differently. Like, for example, when it's a series. When I went into the editing room, I did not initially plan on making it into a series. And especially as long of a series as it was, at the time, I was young. I'm still relatively new in the industry. I got something I gotta prove. I gotta get my name out there. We're all trying to go to the top. And you're gonna get there how you get there. And you're gonna do it by You're going to do it by going the extra mile. You're going to do it by doing things that you probably would not want to do. There were times when there are times even when getting up and doing this interview, I didn't feel like getting up and doing this and talking about this for the umpteenth time, but I went and did it. But you do things, and especially at that time when you're young and you're on a come up, and you're trying to basically create a come up for yourself. You have to do whatever you have to do to get to the level that you want to get to. And you put in a little bit of hard work now, it'll get easier later on down the road. But between the filming process with the interviews, the editing process with bringing all the video and the interviews and the stuff and the other stuff together, and trying to get the support, the financial support from areas of the city of Buffalo, it all made for a very for an invaluable learning experience that I would not trade. I would say that initially, at that particular time, wasn't a whole lot of interest, I would say. People were kind of meh. A documentary film series about Buffalo, about Black Buffalo. Okay. Nobody really was, I don't remember people really jumping out of their seats about it. Now, to the people that were a part of it, they loved it. They were all over it. I mean, we had our premiere night on October 18th, 1997 at the Hall Walls Center in the Tri-Main building. I mean, that was a night to remember, man. That night was magical, man. It was a nervous night starting out for me because the theater that we had in there was a full theater. It was definitely standing room only. And I can remember standing in the with the guy in the projection room. Whew, my heart was racing, man. I wasn't literally like biting my nails, but my heart was racing. I was perspiring. I was sweating, sweating on underarms, and I'm glad I had on a black button-down shirt that night. My goodness. But I was definitely nervous, man. That was probably the most nervous that I've been in my life, because I wasn't sure how it was going to be received. I didn't know when you're in a situation like that for the first time, you don't really know how people are going to receive your work. But, so when I remember when it ended, and there was everybody came to a round of applause, and everybody was I greeted people as they were coming out of the theater. People were looking at me. People were shaking my hands. They shook my hand. People were giving me hugs. People had tears in there. I was like, wow, people were saying just thank you for this, for telling our story, and we had food out there for people. We had a nice little pictorial exhibit. We recorded the event, which is on the Buffalo History Channel, by the way. And we did a number of interviews, and I went home later that night and watched all the interviews, and I was just blown away by all just the adoration and the appreciation that people had for it. But initially, selling it to the community was somewhat of a challenge, because there wasn't nobody really got excited over it. I think that just the thought of, again, they were announcing, and I was being advertised by two arts organizations. You know, we have this young, aspiring black filmmaker, Doug Ruffin, that has this telling a story about the Buffalo community in a documentary film series. And at the time, I don't think we were quite there yet. It was something new. It was sort of a new and kind of a foreign concept to people. So, but once people did come out and see it, you know, the word about it would get around, and then I would get asked then I would get asked all kinds of questions about it. They would ask, how can we see the channel? How can we see it again? And then I would begin a new job working at the public access station, and then I would air it on the channel, on the public access channels. And then so that got it in front of a lot more people. See, there wasn't a whole lot of opportunities to go to film festivals at that time, and they're not going to film festivals aren't going to accept some big, long documentary series or anything like that. So, and that wasn't even a thought then. So I went from where I was at to I was working at a sports news station to a cable access station to do more things do more of the things that I wanted to do. And so once that got out there and it got in front of a lot of people, and a lot of people saw it on television. So that's really what initially really began to get my name out there and start to establish me as a young black documentarian and historian in the city of Buffalo. It has been truly amazing over the past 25 years to see the impact that the B.U.I.L.D. series has made. I said at the outset of this program that it's made its mark in more areas than one. It's made its mark in media. It's in filmmaking. It's made its mark in the documentation and preservation of Buffalo history. It's made its mark in community activism and involvement. So many of those areas were touched by this film series that it's definitely it's a humbling thing. You know, when I consider, you know, sticking my neck out there and taking the chance I took back in 1995 to embark on that journey of trying to bring this story to life, you know, and introduce it to a whole new generation, you know, to modern times. And I've seen so many things mostly in the going as we went into the 2000s. You know, I can remember being part of the Juneteenth committee. Myself and another colleague, Kawanza, you know, we were working with Channel 2 to get them to produce an annual series of Juneteenth specials, which talked about the importance of Juneteenth, not only to the city of Buffalo, but to the entire country as a whole. So, and that went on for a number of years. We see with the whole development of the Michigan Street African American Heritage Corridor. I can go back to, I remember vividly back when Kevin Cottrell planted the seed for that whole effort, and now to see it reach the heights that it's reached today. You have a number of talented young black filmmakers that are in the city of Buffalo telling their own Buffalo stories, you know, and they have followings, and they've been at film festivals. They're on streaming platforms today, and they're all doing an outstanding job. You have young community activists that are concerned about what's going on in Buffalo and bringing Buffalo, wanting to have the best for Buffalo. It used to be a time when most people would come out of school and get ready to be on the next thing, smoking to a whole other city for better opportunities. People are still doing that, but you now have a segment that have chose to stay in Buffalo and are choosing to get more involved in their community. The more interest in history, now you see that transferring to social media. You have a number of Black history groups where people can come into the group and post pictures and post videos and make posts and share their memories, and even people that live in Buffalo and people that don't live in Buffalo, they can talk about what they remember about Buffalo and what they loved about Buffalo, even if you don't live here. But sometimes people come back and it gives people a chance to reminisce. So you have a number of online historians on social media. And then you have the students that, like I said, I get correspondence from students all over the country that are doing doctoral work and master's degree work, and they saw something on the Buffalo History Channel, want to get more information from me. They want me to put them in contact with somebody that I interviewed, So and all of that, a lot of that came from that B.U.I.L.D series. I know people, but I'm gonna tell you, it wasn't an easy road to take. It was not an easy road to take, and I don't really get off on a whole big thing about it, but it's always good to be. I like to know that I was influential in those areas. I don't say that I don't, when sometimes people talk about being the first to do something, and in reality, I really don't consider myself that. I don't consider myself to really be first because there were individuals, I promise you, that came before me. Like I said, I was into something completely different. I wanted to do commercials and program TV channels, be a TV program executive. I wasn't thinking about being no filmmaker. Life happens and you go in different directions. But I will say this much. When you're the first, when you do something first or seemingly do something first, those are the ones that go through the most struggles. I always tell people, you don't really want that. You don't really want that title. Believe me, I rarely classify myself like that. Because believe me, when I look back at some of the struggles I wish I had, let me tell you something, I wish I had social media when I was doing that. Do you have any idea how easier and simpler my life would have made my life so much easier if I had the resources that are out here today? Please give me a break. But like I said, it's that's the path that was ordained. I am glad to see that the documentary definitely did what it was supposed to do. And for that, I can sit here and say that I'm proud 25 years later. Somebody once jokingly said to me that I was creating someone that's been following my stories for quite a while. They jokingly said to me that with the Buffalo History Channel, I'm literally creating a Marvel universe of Buffalo history. And I kind of call it you mean like a Buffalo historical universe, But basically, of course, that's a Marvel reference. Anybody that watches Marvel movies, and you see, and that's because you see the movies and you read the comics, and different characters from various stories will show up in all kind. A lot of the characters will show up in each other's stories, and that was meant to insinuate that if I did something on B.U.I.L.D, I did something on model cities, I did something on the 67 riots. You look at any of those, you tell a story on B.U.I.L.D, something on model cities will show up in the documentary. I do something on model city, something from B.U.I.L.D, somebody from B.U.I.L.D will show up in there. I do other stories. The riots will show up, and different stories from different things. And the Buffalo History Channel has been that platform has allowed for an extension of other Buffalo stories to be told. It's not really the first of its kind. In fact, the Buffalo History Channel, there were already some YouTube channels that were showcasing Buffalo's history and Buffalo's history in the mainstream local media. So this was just my version of what I had. And because a lot of the stuff that I collected over the years, I still had, and I needed to do something with. And at one point I was reluctant to do it because I didn't really want to have all my work and materials out there. But, watermarks help. But that being said, the Buffalo History Channel platform has been the greatest. I will honestly say that has been one of the greatest projects of my career, and it's really brought my life's work full circle, and I can say that honestly. There have been, after B.U.I.L.D. and after Model City, and even with 67. There were many stories that I really wanted to tell. And now with this platform, the advent of this platform now, and with social media coming as full circle as it has, now I have the ability to do that. With the changing of technologies and everything, now I have the availability and the opportunity and ability to do that. You're able to tell the stories of the mayoral campaign of Ambrose Lane. You're able to tell the story of the Apollo as it once stood as a neighborhood movie theater. One of our cornerstones is focusing on the history of Buffalo's black media. We did a program called The Soul of Buffalo TV, where we paid homage to many of the black TV shows, public affairs shows that used to air back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And now we've recently uncovered footage from a television show called Afro Central, which shows a number of things that covers a number of stories that took place in the Buffalo community from the late 70s throughout the early 1980s. We're able to highlight the stories of Lorna Hill and the Ujima Theater Company. We can expand on the story of the Black Dance Workshop. We can expand on the story of Figmo's Supermarket. And we can introduce new stories. Things and show things that people you never thought that you'd see before. Things that are very rare, like an interview with Don Mullins, one of the longtime general station manager at radio station WUFO. We have a rare interview with the man where he talks about its impact on the community, as well as how it gave the youth of the community the opportunity to be in radio. We can highlight the story of the legendary Gale's Family Singers. We can have a rare radio story of one of WBLK's most beloved personalities, Freddie Patrick. That's allowed for us to have in additional stories that I never thought I would even have or be able to showcase. But now we're able to kind of bring it together on one platform, which is the Buffalo History Channel. And the platform itself has so many possibilities. It's amazing. The possibilities are endless. And we've only been like a couple of years. So I can't imagine where it'll be by year 5, by year 10, by year 20. Who knows? I mean, everything is just up, you know, and I couldn't be happier. But I will say, but let me say this, and I say this with the utmost of sincerity. There is no Buffalo History Channel without the B.U.I.L.D. documentary film series.